Hey, everybody. Chodesh Tov for the Jewish month of Nisan. That means good month, the good month of Nisan, which is the month of Passover or Pesach. It represents freedom from our restrictions and our problems and everything that keeps us back from connecting with our Creator, and the month of redemption. Tonight, Rabbi Pinchas Winston will continue with his discussion on the deeper insights of this upcoming holiday, Pesach. Rabbi Winston, thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank
Please
you.
visit his website, 36.org. You can read more about Pesach and many of other fascinating Jewish topics that he writes about, and he has videos and all kinds of things to look at. Website 36.org. Tonight's topic is entitled Pesach Part 2, The War of the Mouths. The shiur is sponsored by the Miriam Project Geula Hour and Josh Wander of Israel Torah.com. And Rabbi, thank you so much for joining us as usual.
Thank you. Part of appreciating the role that mouth plays in the whole process. There's different angles to get to it. I mean, we have expressions in the secular world like talk is cheap, and it is to a large degree. Just open your mouth and just speak, although it can be very costly. A lot of relationships have fallen apart because of words that have been said that can't be taken back. Agreements that were made are broken, and it can be very expensive. But in general, what was the last time that you really paid attention to how many words come out of your mouth? The rabbis tell us that there's actually a cheshbon that they do in Shemaim that basically you have a certain amount of whole words. In other words, when it comes to speaking in Torah, you can talk all you want. Just like, for example, the money you spend on Shabbos and Yantiv and Talmud Torah, there's no cheshbon. Whatever, Hashem will pay it back. But it comes to other things, then it depends upon what you're using it for, and whether you get paid back, don't get paid back, depends on mitzvah, etc. Same thing by speech. That if you're just talking about things that are not so directly Torah oriented, you're not really so focused on Torah, then there's a cheshbon, and you can go into word debt, they say, and which means you have to pay back at some point in time. So you might pay back in this world, might pay back in the next world. So talk is not really so cheap. It can be very expensive, and certainly depending on what comes out of your mouth. Lashon hara, which is derogatory speech about somebody else, mostly shemra, talking bad about somebody, giving them a bad name, libel, things like that. The Gemara talks about bris karus l'sosayim, that the covenant that was cut, so to speak, that was made with the lips, with the mouth, which is an obligation to speak the truth. We have halacha that if a person says one thing and does something differently, then he can get what's called a mishapara, goes back on his word. Mishapara is the same God who punished the generation, the flood, and all these other generations that were evil, could happen to you too, because you went back on your word. So speech is a very, very powerful thing. We know that, and we see that, although in general, we don't treat it that way, because if you're in the right place at the right time, talking to the right people, so you can blab on, just keep going. I mean, how many times a chasna get into a conversation, goes on and on and on, and here I'm going on and on and on. It seems like it doesn't really make such a big difference, but it's actually all the difference in the world. It's the source of freedom, as we mentioned. The Jewish people are getting out of Mitzrayim, right? You had Moshe, who was also a sign of uncircumcised lips. And God says to him, who is the one who makes man speak? Who is the one that a person to hear and think is all from me. So if your stuttering is from me, if I want your stutter to go away, I just boom, take it away from you, just like that. And we don't hear much about Moshe's stutter. Nothing, in fact, after he finally gets this lesson. He goes to Paro, Pera'ah, the evil mouth, because he says all the wrong things. Doesn't quite fall into place. Mi Hashem. There's chutzpah. Mi Hashem. Someone comes down and says that threatens in the name of Hashem. Okay, who's that? But Mi Hashem with arrogance, and so therefore he's called a Perah, and it's one versus the other. And then we have Haggadah on Leil Seder, right? That would to speak out, even if you're by yourself. It's all the speaking. The Jewish people, they leave Mitzrayim, they're actually past Yam Suf. They go past Yam Suf, and then Hashem brings them back. And he wants to perform the miracle of Kriyas Yam Suf. That's what he's going to do. He's going to, open up, the mouth of the sea or the mouth of the earth, by Korach, for example. And So he brings they double back. They didn't have to come back. They've already freed the Mitzrayim. They were brought back and then put into a position of being pinned down by the Mitzrayim. And then they will have the miracle to free them from the Egyptians. But the place that they actually escaped from, the Torah calls Piachirus, the mouth of freedom. Piachirus, right? Now, on one hand, it's like, it's like the place of freedom, or, you can call it all kinds of, the Arabs had a special name for it, by the way. I remember seeing years ago in one of Velikovsky's books, and I think it's been written up by others as well in the meantime, that there's some type of stone that exists by the place that the Jewish people went into the sea that has Arabic writing, and it talks about how someone was eyewitness to the fact that the Egyptians went down into the sea in their chariots and they all drowned. Whatever that's worth. We don't need to have this type of proof. It's just interesting that would be there, not to mention the fact that the 10 plagues are also mentioned in a certain papyrus, or I believe it's found in some museum in the Netherlands, talking about the systematic destruction of Egypt by 10 different calamities. Now, again, in those days you didn't have social media, so the fact that Paro knew that this is Moshe doesn't mean the whole country knew that it was Moshe. So somebody was actually writing this down and didn't know the whole story, and we didn't hear about the whole story, might have seen the calamity. But is the idea of speech itself. Now, before going down that road a bit more and tying it back up for the rest of the Shir B'Ezras Hashem, it's an interesting idea, an interesting concept that seems unrelated, but it has to be part of it. You take flour and you take water and you mix them together, you get matzah. You bake it. You have to bake it first, right? There's people that flour and water, no time to bake it, and they took it over the shoulders, and the sun baked it before it could become chumetz. So as a result of that, which is pretty interesting, because if you ever watch matzah being baked, it's a very precarious situation that's high strung, and because it's so easy to make chametz amongst a small chabura of people, how much more so amongst 3 million Jews who are packing up and leaving Mitzrayim. But that's how you make matzah. Flour and water, matzah. However, flour and water also makes chametz. Exact same thing. You don't have to add yeast to it. Adding yeast to it for sure speeds up the chametz process. It accelerates the chametz process. One of the reasons why we are pretty stringent about things like matzah shira, which is basically what do you call it? What's that matzah called? English egg matzah, right? Egg matzah. I used to love egg matzah. It was good growing up. But one of the reasons why egg matzah is an issue during Pesach, because they put things like apple juice into it, and apple juice is machmitz. It speeds up, accelerates the chumetz process. Now, it's got a hechsher on it, and a pretty good hechsher for that matter, which means that they were careful to make sure that didn't necessarily happen. But it's because it does speed it up, and since, as opposed to other isuri, other things you cannot eat, like treif and things like that, most of the time treif can be bottled. You can annul it in a certain amounts, and it's not the same type of a thing. And also, the punishment usually for eating treif food is malchus. It's a love, which means it's a negative mitzvah. That's not to downplay and make it sound any less serious than it actually is. It's not a reason to eat it, but I'm just saying that compared to Pesach, where a person eats chumetz on Pesach, it's a chayv koros. Koros means the person's cut off from the Jewish people. I think is the English word for that. It's a very serious offense. And on top of that, the Torah says it's asur b'mashahu, that even a little bit of chumetz is forbidden on Pesach. So therefore, it's such a stringent prohibition to begin with. So therefore, you make a lot of fences around it. So therefore, we're careful about things like that, and therefore egg matzah is a little bit of an issue unless a person's old and they can't eat regular matzah. So then they speak to a competent Orthodox rabbi and find what the situation is, and get permission to eat it and use it during Pesach if they have to. And just as a side point, that there's only a mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. Now, because you can't eat bread after that, but you don't have to have matzah the rest of the week. it's a little bit of a problem because on Shvisha Pesach you have 2 meals which you're supposed to have, but you could do with wine and Shabbos too. By the way, if a person can't eat bread, they can't eat matzah, they get sick from it. At least, I mean, a lot of people eat it anyhow because they want to fulfill the mitzvah the proper way. But there are people, for example, who can't eat gluten and even any type of wheat for that matter. And there are other ways to be Yotzi Suda, like for example, having a revius of wine. And if really you need to think even grape juice, you can be motzi. You can't bench on a meal like that, but at least it counts as a suda. You can be Yotzi the mitzvah. So technically speaking, a person for health reasons could get around the problem having matzah the rest of the other 6 days of the week. Trouble is that we like matzah. Matzah is delicious for those who do like it. But the whole point is that we have to be very careful with it. And one of the reasons we have to be so concerned because it can become chametz very quickly. So it's amazing that they had matzah and not chametz because they had to speed out, which itself is a question. Why? Because if you ask the average person, and even not the average person, somebody even above average person who learns Torah, why do we eat matzah at least Leil Seder when the mitzvah is? And the answer is going to be because we left in a hurry. The Torah says we left in a hurry, and we couldn't bake bread. We wanted to. We didn't plan to bake matzahs supposedly, but we got stuck with them. So it's kind of incidental. Matzah seems to be incidental. Oh, the fact that the Avram ate matzah 40 years earlier because he knew about the whole idea in advance. Okay, so doesn't mean that matzah is so essential, but you get to Kabbalah, it does. Very essential. In fact, the difference between the world being unrectified and rectified is represented by the ches of chumetz being broken in the left side and the leg to produce a hay, which transforms the letters of chumetz into the letters of matzah. Like going from chumetz to matzah, that's the tikkun. But back to the original point, the fact that they had flour and water and it became matzah, right? It could easily become chumetz. It's exact same ingredients. You don't have to put yeast in. What's the missing ingredient that transforms the matzah into chumetz? Is time, zman. That's the ingredient. That's the shinu. That's the main change, right? The fact that the flour and water is sat together as a dough for 18 minutes unworked, just sat there, allows it to become chumetz. Starts to crack, starts to dry out, it becomes chumetz. Gamur, midiraisa, from the Torah. The real McCoy. That's exactly what the real chumetz. Exact same flour and water. That could have been, the guy was going to make matzah. He had all the flour, the water. He got distracted, took a phone call, whatever, and lost track of time. And next thing he knew, it was 18 minutes and became chumetz. The same flour and water. They were supposed to be matzah, became chumetz instead because of zman. Zman changed everything, which is very interesting. Why? Because we left b'chipazon. We left in a hurry with pressure. It says that the Egyptians threw us out. They pushed us and encouraged, please go already. We're being destroyed. This land is being destroyed. You got to go. As soon as God's calling you, go already before we have to suffer anymore. We left b'chipazon. And what's interesting about it is that by leaving quickly, we merited matzah. Now, a person will say, well, of course, because there's no time to make the bread, so you got matzah. But as the Maharal explains, it's important to know the reason the matzah is on the Seder, plate is there at the Seder, is not just because of a commemoration of what once was. That flour and water is like the simplest food you can possibly have. You could eat the flour raw just like that, but it's not really food per se, right? And water is water; it's not food; it's drink. And it's a question about whether it's even considered be like food or just even though it's so important to us. And it's the combination of the flour and water that makes the dough, that's the first reality of food, so to speak. And this it represents, because of its simplicity, the world to come. And as the world to come is pashtus. This is the Maharal speaking, right? The world to come is not like this world, which is a conglomerate of different things, a composite, and everything is put together and attached in combinations. It's like literally what called olam perud. the world of separation, because there's so many working parts, so many moving parts in all of creation. But Olam Haba is not like that, even though we'll be individuals there, but so many of the boundaries that are built up in this world between you and me and the next person all around us, they disappear. In fact, I saw in a sefer recently that, it's an interesting idea. I mean, I kind of heard about this before, but the way it was said was kind of new. And it said that in the Yemos Mashiach, as early as the Messianic era, which things going on today is probably not too far behind or too far ahead, B'ezras Hashem, but no one will have to say, teach me something. In Yemos Mashiach, you wanted to learn anything from anybody else. Everyone will just know it. It says, the prophet says, that Kosh Baruch Hu be male the world with das, which means like godly, not just knowledge, but godly knowledge. And that godly knowledge will allow everyone to be in touch with truth. So you'll be able to just know everything. And partly, I believe, because since there's no Yetzer Hara, we'll also probably be able to read each other's minds. Because there'll be nothing to be embarrassed about. There'll be nothing that's going to be a reason for pause to think about it, because everything right now in this world basically is that way. With the Yetzer Hara, we make all kinds of mistakes. We make embarrassing mistakes. We have private, personal issues. Sometimes there are issues we might not mind sharing with other people. But the problem is we don't know how they're going to take it, because they have a Yetzer Hara, and they're going to pass judgment on us and the things that we say and the things that we do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in this world we have to be closed off. We have to be sealed off, and because we have to be sealed off, the way to communicate means I have to take from the inside and bring it to the outside. Now, it's important to know, for example, according to Kabbalah, this is a little highfalutin, so to speak, but it's just to bring out the idea, to show you the importance of the speech. Things that we take for granted in Kabbalah, it's not that way, because Kabbalah breaks it down to the most essential aspects of life. It brings up the real questions. See, science, even the quantum mechanics, they have no problem with the physical world being the physical world. Since they're not dealing with infinity, they're not dealing with God, they're not concerned about that. That's not their issue. They're only dealing with what is. They want to understand what the world is, how it works, and how it got to the way it is today. These are all interesting things. But it's not an issue of how is it possible for the finite world to exist inside of an infinite reality. They don't deal with that. So because of that, they don't have these very high, deep philosophical issues. But the Torah does, because we believe that God is infinite. And we know this world is finite, and we know this is a living contradiction. We don't understand. Can't even resolve it. All we can do is say that's the way it is, because we see that is the way. God has to be infinite, and this world certainly does seem to exist. And we don't know exactly. We have some ideas about it, but not that much, because really the answers, as God told Moshe, are really beyond the physical world that we're in right now, because of our bodies. When Moshe on top of Mount Sinai says to God, he got forgiveness for the Jewish people being involved in the golden calf, and forgiveness for the Jewish people not stopping the golden calf. That was the main thing they did, and for testing Hashem and wondering if they're going to be cut off because of what took place. And he sees it's a propitious moment. He sees it's an advantageous opportunity to push the envelope, so to speak. So he says to God, "Show me your glory." Not just simple pasuk, simple words. That exactly what does he mean by that, but he means basically, the Gemara explains a little bit, but I want to understand the deeper inner workings of creation, like what makes this world tick the way it does. And God says to him, "No, shtok, alaba machshel lefanai. It's not possible. Be quiet. This is what I plan to do. This is how I do it." And Kabbalah explains what it really means. Alaba machshel, it went up. In my mind, which just sounds like it's more of a metaphor. This is what I thought to do, and that's the way I learned it for the first 25 times. But then you just learn a little bit Kabbalah. And Kabbalah explains, and the God was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, Machshava is a very high level in the spheres beyond our comprehension. It's cut off. You cannot be in a physical body and access that knowledge, because if you did, you would die. That's what God says. No man can see my face, because no man can see my face and live. God doesn't have a face. Yeah, but face is just a matter of speaking. It's called panim, because, like from the word, panimi, inside, because a face reveals on the outside what's actually going on the inside. You can't tell what's going on inside of a person from the back of their head. It's very nondescript. But the face, emotions, the facial expressions, things like that, can tell you what's going on the inside, on the outside. So we talk about the face of God. We're talking about a sublime understanding of who God is and how He works the world. So Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, in general terms, because Kabbalah does talk about these things in general terms, but to understand in detail, it's not going to happen. Not while you're alive. Because if I did get information to you, your body would not be able to survive. And I need you to survive to lead the Jewish people to Eretz Canaan. So you'll have to wait until after death. And at some point then, this will all start becoming revealed to us. But the point is that the fact that there's a physical and there's a spiritual, and they're interacting with each other, and there's a soul in the body, and somehow, even though the soul is infinite, it's part of God, even though it's finite, the soul, because it's your soul, not his soul, not her soul. So it's finite, it has got gvulot, it's got boundaries, but it's part of God who's infinite, instead of the physical body, which is finite. It goes around and around, it's like, it's not easy. It's not easy, right? But kacha, that's the way it is. A great Jewish word. Why is it kacha? That's the way it is. That's why we found it. That's why we find it. So Moshe has accepted and go back down the mountain. I mean, what he understood, what he saw is unbelievable. What he passed down is tremendous, and yet it's still not even, it's just a fraction of the picture. I don't know if some of the greater Mekubalim, Kabbalists over time, really, I mean, I know they knew a lot more than they actually taught, and they gave over, but how much they actually understood, how much in the physical body, I'm not sure. But the idea is that the body is called a kli, like a glass. A glass is a kli, a vessel. And the water inside is like the soul, except it's physical, the water, but the soul's not. And there's this intrinsic problem when you're moving from the infinite to the finite, where they have to come together, but it's like matter and antimatter. Technically speaking, your soul should cancel out your body. Put it in. Oh, that didn't work. Try another one. No, not working. They don't go together. They're really contradictory to one another. Yet some miracle happened where God made it possible. That's why the soul constantly wants to go back to Shemaim, and the body constantly wants to go back to the earth. That's where they came from. They're very different, with different goals, and that's where there's a horror or instinct, and the soul wants to go, these bodidus and be misponen on Hashem. Two different realities, and they come together like I always imagine, like two guys breaking out of jail. One's a nice guy who shouldn't have been in the first place, but he got framed or something, and he's chained at the ankle to somebody who did deserve to be in jail, and they broke out finally, or the other guy broke out and slept them along with him, and now questions which way to go. And the other guy says, I'm going to go home to my wife and children, and live a normal life. And the guy says, no, I'm going to go, to down the red light district of some city someplace. They're pulling at the ankle. That's like the body and soul to a large degree. So how does it work? So Kabbalah in Eitz Chaim and the Zohar, they talk about this process of how the lights move down from being completely spiritual to moving towards more physicality. It's amazing how this is more physical, but don't think it's physical again. It's still very spiritual, but it's more physical, but so spiritual, and keeps moving down and moving down. And the first level, because the spheres, which are the spiritual entities that God created to transfer his life from him to us, and to make creation and to maintain creation, sustain creation, is all these things called the spheres. And basically, as the light goes down, the spheres where our bodies correspond to the spheres. So we have a head, we have arms. So the spheres there's what's called the three brains, which is Keser, Chachma, Bina, and then you have the right arm, which is Chesed, the left arm, which is Gvura, and they break it into different joints and things like that. But it's all based upon the spheres. They're all set up like a human being. And in the beginning, as the lights are coming down from the level, what's called the level of the eyes, but it's not really eyes at all. It's just a very high level in the spheres. It goes down to the first place where you actually have the creation of a kli, of a vessel, of something that can contain a light. Until that point, everything's just light, no kli. It's moving towards that direction, but no kli yet. The first level, according to Kabbalah, way up in the system, way up, that you actually have the formation of a kli that can hold the light, is called the malchus, which is called the peh, the mouth. The mouth is the place where the kli is actually formed and the lights go into it. Now, on the level we're talking, it's still very premature. It's still very high up, but it's called peh. The mouth itself, that's the place where the vessel. Now you have to understand, without this, there's no body, no soul. Soul, yes, you can have a soul, no problem. It's part of God, exists forever. But it's the body. The body is the key issue over here, because it's the body. It's like having a car. If you don't have a car, you can't get around. I mean, you can walk and go places, but the car makes you very mobile, makes you faster. It's a big advantage. So the body is your car. It gives form to your soul. It's like putting a sheet over a ghost, right? As long as the ghost is visible, can't see him. You know, they put a sheet over him or something. We don't believe in ghosts, but that type of an idea. Dippo, yeah, things like that. But the same things. The soul is kind of like formless. It may have an identity, but it's formless and it can't accomplish anything. And that's important. So the body that gives form and really gives function to the soul, but the soul itself is like the engine inside the car. It's really what's driving the car. The car has all kinds of parts, a chassis, there's the doors and the mirrors, but it's the engine that drives. If the engine's not working properly, the car's not going to work. No matter how nice a Mercedes-Benz, a Rolls-Royce, whose engine is not working properly, is not going to drive well. It'll be comfortable, and certainly the status will be there, but it's not the same car. So likewise, the bodies, and I said the kli, that's what's necessary for the soul to accomplish things, and that's the way you earn your reward in the world to come. That's the idea. Now, what makes that possible? See, this is again, I mean, science does focus on the concept of time as being the fourth dimension, and as being a creation, and the importance of it in terms of life and as a means of change and all that. But the main thing about time is it allows for the creation of the kli, because without time, everything is infinite. By definition, nothing can change. Infinite means nothing changes, because change implies once it was like this and now it's like that. So as long as there was no time, and there was no time in the beginning, which is God's light everywhere, which is infinite, there could be no kli. So the vessel, right? So the creation of time, when God finally did that, was a huge chiddush, was a huge novelty, so to speak. It's such a crucial part that made it possible, because the soul can be above time and is above time. Every night when you go to sleep, it says that there's 5 levels of soul. So the levels of soul, a little bit of soul remains in your body so you don't die. Sleep is called 1/60th of death, because most of your soul leaves your body at nighttime when you're sleeping. It goes up to higher levels in the spiritual realm. And those higher levels are above time. So the soul doesn't have to have time to exist. It's part of God, which is infinite, but the body does. The body must have time. Without time, it by definition, it's finite. So it has to have a beginning and it has to have an end, even if it morphs and changes and becomes more spiritual over time. So time made that possible. That made that possible. But the problem with all of that is that we went to the other extreme with it. That's what mankind's propensity is, to go to one extreme or another. On one hand, you have a tzaddik. You're the righteous person. You see the way a tzaddik lives? He chooses poverty to a large degree. I mean, he doesn't call it poverty. There are people who are living in poverty, and they call it poverty. But a tzaddik, a lot of times, could easily have gotten involved in something else to make more money, to take care of his needs, his family needs. But he doesn't want to be part of this world. He's enjoying not being, in some places they call it an ascetic, but it's more than that. This person is connected to the ultimate reality of Olam Haba. The real pleasure in life does not come from material goods. They can help us. They assist us. And some of us are dependent and even addicted to them to be able to have some sense of joy on a regular basis. But the ultimate source of joy and shleimus and completion in this world does not come from the material world. It's not the physical things we have. There are people who have lots, not everybody, but many, and depressed day after day. And there are people very little and are happy to no end. And yes, it's a mentality, but it's more than that. They're hooked into something else. We have been drawn down into the world of the Yetzer Hara, into the world of the body. We became so obsessed with the vehicle, the kli, so to speak, that it became our whole world. I mean, you look in the mirror, you see your body. When was the last time you saw a soul? Well, you can't, because souls are invisible. And I'm not talking about the shoes on the bottom of your feet, or the soles on the bottom of your shoes, right? We're talking about this soul. How do you know this? Well, it's just, there's proof for it, because we know the body is instinctual. We know that the body is worried about survival, and therefore the body does anything it can to survive, and that might mean being selfish, which it tends to be. So even grown-up people have to stop themselves, somebody, and say that's the selfish thing to do. I'm not going to do that. It doesn't seem right. I'm going to be more noble than that. I'm going to share my sandwich. I'm going to share my time because someone else needs. Love your neighbors yourselves. I'm going to share. That's not a function of the body, unless the body is doing it to get ahead. If the body says, well, if I scratch his back, he'll scratch my back, meaning that if I help him out, he'll help me out. So therefore, I'm not really doing it to help him out. I'm doing it to help myself out. It just has the form of helping out because that's the way to get my own thing back. That's not the same thing. We're talking about someone who doesn't need to give to get back. I just simply want to give because that's the right thing to do. So when I had that attitude, then basically that's my soul talking. Every time you do something against your body, by definition, that's the soul revealing itself. How do I know a soul exists? Because my body would never do things like that. That body would never do things like that. Wow, that's an amazing act. There was once a story I read in the I think the Jewish Observer many years ago. It's supposed to be a true story of someone who's called Herschel, the late son, which means like a comic. And it was, I think, set in the 1800s, the story in Chernobyl. And the Chernobyl Rebbe was once approached by a woman whose husband was thrown to Russian jail for trumped up charges, and it took a lot of rubles to get him out, and she had nothing. She was poor. She begged the Rebbe to help her out, and he decided to go to the marketplace to try to raise some money to help her husband. And when he was there, he noticed down a little ways was Herschel, the late son, surrounded by a bunch of people, as was normal for him, doing his shtick, making fun of people walking by and getting laughs, cheap laughs and all that. And so immediately the Rebbe saw that he turned away to try to avoid him, but it was too late. Herschel already saw him. And Herschel said, "Oh, good, here's some good fodder for entertainment." And he came and he approached the Rebbe with his whole crowd who were waiting to see what he's going to do next. And Herschel said to the Rebbe, he says, "Rebbe, why are you in the marketplace?" So he had no choice but to tell the truth. And he said, "There's a certain man who's thrown in jail for the wrong reasons, and the Russians won't let him go out unless he pays ransom money, and I'm here to try to collect money." So the audience is like, "Okay, well, what's going on?" So Herschel reaches into his pocket. He pulls out all the money that the Rebbe needs, and he puts into his hand. And they're all like, "Wait, he's going to grab the money back, or knock his hand down, or do something really embarrassing that's going to be very, very funny." And Herschel didn't do that for some reason. The Rebbe was stunned. He also was waiting for the punchline in all of this, because this is not Herschel the late son, not to give his money up like that for a cause like this. And he waited, and everyone waited as well. And it became apparent, and Herschel stood there, and it became apparent that he wasn't taking the money back. And Herschel didn't know why himself. And the people got tired of the whole thing and just started going away. And the Rebbe, when he finally realized that the money was being left in his hand, turned to Herschel and he said to him, "You should be blessed and you should know the pleasure of Shabbos." And why did he say that specifically? Well, what happened? Herschel went home. He told his wife what happened, how crazy the whole thing was. And she, of course, yelled at him. How could you do a thing like that? And then what would happen? Wednesday would come around. And on Wednesday, all of a sudden he started acting strange. And Thursday, even stranger. By Friday, he was beside himself. By Shabbos, he was uncontrollable. And then Sunday would get better again. And then Monday and Tuesday, and by Wednesday, same thing would repeat itself, week after week. So finally, he told his wife what had happened, and she went to the Chernobyl Rebbe and said, "What did you do to my husband? He's going crazy. Every Wednesday this happens. Thursday we're going to show." So it's like, what did you do? He said, "Send him to me, and I'll heal him." So he came, and as the story goes, he stayed. He stayed, and he became a chassid of the Chernobyl Rebbe, and became a Rebbe in his own Rebbe down the road. Right? That was a soul thing. The body doesn't do like that. Now, why that happened and how it happened like that, I'm not sure. Hashgacha pratis, divine providence, set the whole thing up. But that's evidence of the soul. The beautiful thing about learning Torah, one of the many beautiful things, there's so many beautiful things about learning Torah, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod, Mishnah, Gemara, Kabbalah. There's so many, but one really beautiful thing about learning Torah is it neutralizes the body and gives you a chance to live as a soul, to get to know yourself as a soul. If it's really being mashpia on a person, then it helps them to form a kli that fits the soul. That's what we're trying to do. It's like you go to a clothing maker, right? A man goes to a suit maker, or a woman goes to a dressmaker, and they start with a piece of material, a piece of cloth, right? And that piece of cloth, maybe is cut generally to the shape of the person, and they put it on. It's weird. It looks like doll clothing because it's not fitting properly the way it's supposed to, but it's pinned up and all that. And they do a fitting, and then they trim it down a bit more and come back in a second fitting and a third fitting till finally they get a suit that fits the person. And that he pays for the suit and goes on his way. It's fine until he does. It's not his suit. If it doesn't fit comfortably, if at some point in the process it doesn't work, it's not his suit. He's not going to pay for it. It's got to fit properly. The same thing is true. When we come into this world, we come with the body. It's untrained. It's like a piece of flesh. That's what it looks like. It sounds like. You see a baby, they're just lying there. They're not doing anything, just making some noises and crying a lot. And around the clock, they don't do very much. And then as you start to grow up and you start to develop motor capabilities and muscles develop, and also the baby starts to crawl, hopefully, and starts to walk and develop itself. But what's really going on, and this is really what chinuch is all about, this is what education is supposed to be, this is what parenting is supposed to be all about. We're like dressmakers. We're like like tailors. That's what we're supposed to be for other people and for ourselves. We're supposed to get the body to fit the soul. Now, to some degree, you can't help it. It's going to happen anyhow, because the soul is very powerful, especially at certain times will come up. But you ever notice how different you are when you're at shul, right, in synagogue, right, and in spiritual situations, and at a cemetery, for example? Everyone's different. Oh, well, a lot of dead people. People die. Death is sad, so you can't really be funny in a cemetery. You can't, be lightheaded. It's just not appropriate. But who says and why? That's the soul. That's the soul. The soul knows, even though it's education and it's nature, nurture, but the soul knows. But as we're going through life, basically, that's all we're doing. We're custom designing our bodies to fit our souls. A tzaddik is not someone who's forgotten about their body. There's somebody who's been able to tailor their body to their soul. And when they finally do that, there's a story in the Gemara. I love reading the story. It's just a short paragraph, but it's a very nice story. And it's about it's a Nadarim, it's a Nazir, of a young man who was tending the sheep of his father, and he brought them to the city. Well, anyhow, right now he became a Nazir, right? That's the Nazareth, right? Whatever is, the hair grows, can't drink wine, and he came to cut off the hair, as he's supposed to do at the end of the period of time of being a Nazir. And being a Nazir it's a machlok, it's a discussion whether it's a good thing, a bad thing. We should do, shouldn't do it, basically. In certain circumstances, it's good to. And this man had beautiful hair, like curly hair, very, very attractive individual. And Shimon ben Shattach, said, I never ate the chatos of a Nazir or of anybody, I think, for the entire thing except for this one time. and why it was this nazir. Because one of the things they have to do is bring a chatas, a sin offering, because again, abstaining from food is not always an ideal situation. So it's a discussion as to what the sin offering is for, but he has to bring a sin offering. And the Kohen, Shimon Bashetek was a Kohen, and he eats from that sacrifice. Anyhow, so he asked him, what drove you to be a nazir? What drove you to be, to cut off this beautiful hair of yours? Most people don't do that. Instead, they flaunt it. And here you are doing this very L'Shem Shemaim thing. So he said, I was a shepherd for my father, and I brought the sheep to the city, and I took him to the well to drink, and my Yetzer Hara jumped all over me because he looked at his reflection. And in his reflection, he saw that he was a handsome person. I guess those days there were mirrors all over the place. He probably didn't pay attention to that at all. But he happened to see this reflection. And he saw that he was an attractive individual. His Yetzer Hara began to make him feel gaivadik, made him feel proud. Make him feel like I'm someone special. And he responded. This guy's a tzaddik. He responded by saying, Russia, you're such a Russia. He calls the Yetzer Hara Russia. And he says, why do you want a world that's not yours? Why do you want things that don't belong to you? Right? I'll teach you a lesson. I'm going to become a Nazir and I'll cut it all off. I'm going to become a Nazir to Hashem, and then I'm going to cut all the hair off the end, and then I'll teach you a lesson to try to push me to be something I shouldn't be. When Shimon ben Shetach, he heard this, he said there should be more Nazirim like you in Israel, and he gave him a kiss in the head. It's like, okay, it's a nice story, beautiful story. Well, it's like spices. Sometimes you're eating something and it's all evenly spiced, but sometimes it's spiced a bit more in one spot for one reason, and you taste that one spot and it brings it the flavor so strongly. The Gemara does the same thing too. This time the Gemara teaches, and it's got all these halachas and stories and agadata. You got to pay attention, because sometimes in these little short stories they're telling you so much about life in this world. That summed up everything. This wasn't like, by the way, here's a story about a Nazir who used to be a shepherd for his father, and this would happen. No. He got it. He understood that the essence, the first page of Sharha Gilgulim starts off by saying that you should know. We have 5 levels of soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, one body, right? Different lifetimes, but one body, but the body is not you. The essence of the person is the soul. That's who you are, in essence. And it's like putting on clothing. Clothing make the man, but clothing are not the man. They are not who you are. For one day, you felt like the boss of a huge business, but then you have to come home and take off the clothing, take a shower, go to sleep. The clothing go back in the closet. The cleaners is not who you are. The essence of who you are is your soul. That's what it says in Shara Gulim, and that's the whole idea. And the truth is, that is where freedom comes from. Freedom, that is the essence of it. And in Redemption to Redemption, I speak about this idea more, the importance of developing the Adam, right? Adam is what man was called, right? But the word Adam itself represents the completion of a person. The gematria of Adam is 45, which is also the gematria of geula, which means redemption. It's also 45 is the mispar katan of emes, I believe is Aleph 400. Was it 441? No, that's 9. Sorry, bagula. Okay. In fact, if you take the aleph out of Adam, you get the word dam, which is his flesh and blood, and out of the word gula is gola, which is a person in exile. A person is only able to be free if they're wearing the body that suits their soul. If you're dressing up your body, if you're making your body into something that's not matim to your soul inside, you'll never be free. It's like going in 2 different directions. You'll be tearing at yourself, and it eats away at us day after day, which is one of the reasons why the world's so unhappy, because we're constantly being told by society and seeping into the frum world too, how we have to look, how we have to behave, regardless of who we are inside. But the happy person doesn't listen to that. They're in tune. They listen. They've been looking for their soul. They've been listening to their soul, and they're shaping their life according to that. And that's where speech comes in the end. Because, as we said way back at the beginning, as a Zohar says, you can tell what a person is, who they are like, by how they speak. And in the beginning, we just said that just means the more spiritually refined a speech a person has, then the more spiritually inclined they are. And that's the truth about a person. As opposed to a person speaks gas, they speak in a very vulgar or very overly simplistic way, a very material way. So they're not really in touch with their soul. That's 100% true, completely. But it's more than that. It's the speech itself becomes it's a way to measure how well you have been able to tailor your goof, your body, your kli, your vessel to your soul. You have almost no other way. Speech itself. When you talk, what comes out of your mouth, you can hear, is that me? Does that, that doesn't sound like me. Sometimes you catch yourself, it's really extreme, or you say something for some reason and you say, that doesn't sound like me. Why would, I got carried away with this conversation, got pulled into it, but that's not really me. Because if it is me, I'm a little disappointed that I could actually stoop to such a level. So the whole concept of freedom, the reason why the Haggadah is so central, why speech is so important, and not just on Pesach. Pesach is the classroom, so to speak. It's the place where we learn the lesson for the rest of the year about the power of speech to help us to go back to who we actually are by paying attention to what we say, and not just paying attention to what we say, but planning what we're going to say. What do I want to come out of my mouth? What do I want to share with the rest of the world? And is that me? Because if it's not, I'm not going to be free. But if it is, then I'll know it. And you start to feel yourself. And one of the best proofs that you're on target, on the mark, and it's fitting, it's working out properly, you just don't feel the need for external pleasures that much. Hashem built us. Believe it or not, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. He built us that we can actually have extreme happiness sitting in one spot just by being who we really are in essence. The reason why people have to go running around to have so much other things in their life, to have that pleasure, to have that joy, to have that sense of happiness, which is fleeting, which is why they keep having it again and again, and another kind, is because no one's themselves. Depression, all this, because people are being things that they're not, and it's like it's not lined up. It's like out of kilter. It's like with the eyes. How frustrating it is when you cannot get your eyes to focus on something and see it clearly. It really very bothersome. You put glasses and all of a sudden it lines up. I can see exactly pristine vision, and it feels so good. But even better on the level of the body and the soul. So that's what we're after. That's the freedom. That's what Purim was supposed to help us find, because Purim was supposed to help us get in touch with our soul. The drinking on Purim, neutralizing the body, to find out what our soul is. And then by Pesach time, right, we cut back on the chumash specifically in order to rebuild the kli, in a sense, from scratch, but more matim, with the knowledge of what the soul is. The same way a person walks into a store to get a suit, not every suit's going to work. Not every dress is going to fit, for everybody. It depends upon who you are. So likewise, during Pesach, we begin the process, and during the Omer and Shavuos, but it's all a path to freedom. And the path is right inside. And yet, billions of people for thousands of years haven't known this, haven't done it, haven't used it. Even people sitting down to make a Seder aren't so aware of it. But if you start the process, the rewards are amazing, even from the very beginning. So I wish that for everybody, B'ezras Hashem, Chag Kosher V'Samech, and B'ezras Hashem, we'll pick up again after Pesach.
Rabbi, thank you so much. I just want to, we want to know a lot more about how to tailor make our neshamas to fit our bodies and vice versa. I just want you to know that tonight, someone said on the chat, glad to be learning live with you. And I say this probably, many people say this every week. And there was somebody listening from India tonight. We have a lot of Indian people who are very interested in doing tshuva, or maybe they already are Jews, we're not sure. But anyway, Rabbi, thank you so much. And we wish for you a beautiful, very happy and peaceful Pesach. And everybody out there, thank you for joining us every week. And we hope to bring you more programming. If you have some topics you'd like to know about or hear the Rabbi speak about, please write in the chat or contact either Josh Wander or myself. Webinar sponsored by the Miriam Project Geula Hour and bringthemhome.org.il. Josh Wander. Thank you, Rabbi, so much for joining us.
Yes,
And
thank you.
Chodesh Tov, good Shabbos, and Chag Sameach, everybody.